and we have a conversation about product thinking, minimal viable product, and Leanception. I'm Paulo Caroli. I'm the author of Inception, and I have worked together with Roger many years ago. I always loved Inceptions, and I did participate in a few Inceptions with Roger. He moved away from Brazil to Australia. Roger, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Roger Almeida. I am the head of digital for DNX, AWS partner and consultancy company. And I had the great pleasure of moving to Porto Alegre and working with Paulo in a very special phase of our lives, right? You were getting married, having kids, and I had my kids as well, talking about how to bath a baby and take care of newborns.
Remember your advices, yes. Great advice. Which, by the way, the story of Inception has to do with babies and family. We will get there soon.
So I can say I was there when we were creating these, and it's so impressive to see what Inception has become now, the huge success it is in Brazil. And now I hope we can spread it around the world and everybody can see and can leverage that fantastic tool that you guys have created.
Awesome.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, let's, Roger, we have only 1 hour. Let's get started. We do have a presentation. It should be around 30 minutes. But if you do have questions, please type on the chat and we will be answering your questions. We want to engage with you on this webinar, on this conversation.
Yeah.
So let me share my screen here. 1 second. Okay. And I'm sharing this screen here. Awesome. So think big, start small, learn fast. This is the agenda. First, we'll talk a little bit about us. Then we go over product thinking, MVP, minimal viable product, Leanception, and we close with a good conversation with everybody.
Yes.
Okay. We introduced ourselves very briefly. We didn't say we're both Brazilians.
Yeah.
I lived in Silicon Valley. I lived in Brazil. I lived in India. And I'm currently living in Europe, in Madrid. I do work for ThoughtWorks as a consultant. So I specialized myself on the beginning of the projects in a phase that we call Inception. And since 2011, I started making the Inceptions more lean. And then from 2014 onwards, I named Leanception and I started sharing about Leanception. Roger, what about you?
As I mentioned, my career, I'm now in the DevOps and digital space as well. But my background is in software development and as a developer, as QA, architect as well. So I believe I did everything related to software development. And in the later 5 years, I have moved towards digital and cloud native solution. And it's so interesting to see the relationship between starting well a project and the success that it can achieve and the importance of having MVP in the projects as well. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Okay, moving forward, a little bit about product thinking and a little bit about the history of Leanception. So I'm an agile developer since 2000 when I met Kent Beck and I started following extreme programming. I worked on several startups from 2000 to 2006. So I like the startup environment. Unfortunately, back on the days, we did not have a good methodology for working on startups. And then I joined ThoughtWorks, which is really good on agile software delivery. And one thing I realized is once the Lean Startup book was released, there was a shift on my career. Suddenly I realized, hey, wait a sec, there's something different here. There's a different approach. In fact, it was much more about product thinking than project. Before I used to think about projects and even on the agile way, figure out everything we need to do for the project. And when I read that book, it changed my life because that cycle, the build, measure, learn, made a big difference on the way the startups work and the way we want to work in all the companies, not only startups. Build, measure, learn. We build something, the minimum necessary to validate we're going in a good direction. Then we put this on the hands of the final users or the early adopters or a small subset of your users to get the learning and then decide what to do next, expand, what to build more. And the challenge I had as a consultant, I was specialized on Inception, the beginning of an agile project. And suddenly, and this has to do with having a kid, the Inceptions were long. And then suddenly I want to reduce the length of Inception to 1 week so I could come back home to take care of my son. And in order to reduce it, by coincidence, the Lean Startup book was released on the same year my son was born. And then I used the MVP concept as an excuse. I said, look, before I used to take like 3-4 weeks to understand the overall project. Now let's focus on the MVP. So we're going to use only 1 week to focus on the MVP. And then that's how Inception was born. From that cast, the trial to let's figure out, okay, what's the product strategy, but how do we start small? What is the minimum viable product? And Inception is the practical experience after running, I don't know, now more than 500 Inceptions, the practical experience on how to align a group of people to decide what is the MVP to start small.
Fantastic. Yeah, and we can talk about the difference between project-based and product-based, because we talk about minimum viable product, and everybody asks me, so does that mean I cannot use it for projects? And then I say, that's not the question you should be asking. You should be asking, what's the most effective way for you to achieve success? Because that's really the tools that we are creating is for that. It's not about being product-based, project-based, or what's the operational module. Is more about where you are and where you want to get. So a traditional project-oriented company would think about a track, like a train track, where you have a defined path from where you are to where you will be. You build all the infrastructure around it to make sure that there's no train, wagging around the track. They are on the track or they are not on the track. That's it. There is no more or less solution here. While if you are starting a new idea, it's more like a trail, right? Where you know where you are, you know that you want to reach the top of the mountain, and to get there, there's no really easy path. If you start moving the screen, you'll get dizzy, Paulo.
Sorry.
Yeah, so you have a starting point, an end point, and you have to keep correcting the direction. A good example that I discovered with a colleague of mine was that when we were launching rockets to the moon, 80% of the time is just correcting the path. That's what the computer is doing, because you know where you are, you know where you want to get, but if you do a small mistake in such a long journey, you can end up out of the solar system. So for me, that's the main difference between product-based and project-based, is what you want to achieve. If you have certainty on everything, then I will say you save time by building a track. But most of the time, uncertainty is the only constant that we have, right, Paulo?
Yeah, I totally agree. I never worked on a project where that huge plan that we made was exactly what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's why I got used to be really good on this trail metaphor that we're doing. Like that's what we do now. Like we got really good on building that team. Many times a product team or squad or like whatever team, strong team you can build, and that team is very flexible on pursuing that direction you want to get to the top of that mountain, right?
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Okay. What else? Let's talk about this very strong concept that became really famous after Eric Ries's book, MVP. So minimal viable product is the simplest version of a product that you can put in the hands of a user to validate your business hypothesis. That's what MVP is about. We want to bring you a few examples. Well, before bringing the examples, we want to talk that when you try to figure out what is that minimal viable product, there are three perspectives that you need to look. One is what's valuable for the business. Another one, what's feasible that us engineers can build. And the third one, what's desirable, what's usable by the users. Usually the MVP is on that intersection. You need to figure out the intersection, not the minimum thing for one of those perspectives. It's the minimum thing that accomplishes the three aspects, those three perspectives. It's really hard to find them.
Yeah.
Roger, this one's for you. What does this mean?
So that means that you don't have to just follow normal paths where you will plan everything and do a horizontal development of, okay, let's do all the analysis on the feasibility of this product and say, yes, it's possible to build it. But then you don't know if it's bringing value to the customers who are gonna buy it. Is it usable? And will they be impressed and talk to others, spread the word about your product? Sometimes it's just feasible. You can say, yeah, we can do it. There's the technology. We can build the website, the app to do that. But the hard part is you convincing people to use it. So what you have to do instead is to build an MVP that has a vertical slice of it where you can check the feasibility of a small portion of it, what's the value that small portion is bringing, how to make it usable, and how to impress your customers so they can say, hey, there's this new idea coming and everybody should be using it and everybody will be talking about it. So MVP is not about having like a business plan. It's about having something that you can, the simplest version that you can validate all your hypotheses and learn from it.
Yeah, I like to hear this from you. Roger is a DevOps person.
Yeah.
So he's not the kind of DevOps person that's going to say, oh, first we need to build the whole DevOps platform.
Yes.
No, he knows we need to work on this lean startup style where let's build the minimum necessary from the platform as from the business, that we can validate with the users. And it does have a wow factor that the users love it and we keep on building more.
Yes.
And this brings to the point, like I used to be a developer as well. I know Roger became closer to technology, which is when I start work with MVP, it was really hard because I used to think about the final architecture, but the minimal viable is not a few components of that, it's incomplete components, but they provide you what's needed to validate your business direction. So it's kind of interesting and hard. It was hard for me as a developer and architect because the internal components, they're all incomplete. And that's the reality of MVP. Your product, the overall product features and the internal quality of your product are incomplete.
Yes.
But in good state, if things keep on moving forward, you can build faster and faster.
Yeah.
And you also have these, right, Roger?
Yeah.
The funnels.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes I can see that everybody talks about the building part. I'm gonna build an MVP. I'm gonna build this. I have to build. I know what I will build, but it's more than that. It's how you attract people to your sales funnel to say, what's the value proposition that you're putting out there that will catch someone's eyes to say, hey, I have to check that idea. I have to check that project. I have to check that offer. And then how do you make that person to click on register, to click on signing up for your idea? And then how do you keep them involved while you are building it? And what are the revenue streams? So many great ideas that people had, but there was no way to find a revenue stream on it. And then what are you going to do? You're going to keep invest on it and there's no money coming to sustain the development. And how do you expand on that and make sure that everybody who is using it create the wow effect so they can spread the word? Otherwise, your cost of acquisition will just increase, right? So how many dollars you have to spend to bring a new customer to your product, to your platform, to your service? That's something that the MVP should help you validate as well. And because when you have the right product, when you find the product market fit, then you have pressure to build it the right way. But until there, you have to validate off that without, investing $1 million before attracting $1.
Yeah. While listening to you, I thought about two things. One is be careful with vanity metrics. That's why you want to test the whole thing. If the customers use, they paid, and they're referring, about whatever you put in their hands. And another thing is like, they can pay, they can refer, which means an MVP is not a prototype. It's something usable that the customer is willing to pay for it.
Yes, that's true.
Now, we'll bring you a few examples. First, this one is kind of a metaphor, which I used for long ago. I did a master thesis from 97 to 99. And on my master thesis, I used to talk about the layer architecture, right? Before agile development for me. Then when I got to US in 2000, then 2001, 2002, then I read the book User Story Applying by Mike Cohn. I was like, wow, that metaphor doesn't make sense because, and I like Inceptions, even though we plan the whole cake, we deliver slice by slice. So I still kept the cake metaphor, but saying, hey, I'll provide you slice by slice. And then 2011, 2012, 2013, I started doing Inceptions, and we're not planning a whole cake anymore. And then my brain exploded. I'm like, wow, what do I do? And I realized what we build, they're cupcakes. They're the minimal viable thing to validate. And in fact, there was a wedding company in San Francisco that they used to call Wedding Cake. I think the website was weddingcake.com. And people would fill up a form online, and they would schedule time with them. And then when you got there, instead of them charge, hey, it's $1,000 to buy a cake, they would provide you a few cupcakes with the flavor combination that you liked. But they were amazing. The experience was complete, was very small, and people could try. And then they could validate, hey, between those three, the chocolate from Belgium, raspberry pie, cheesecake, the customer prefers this one. Let's keep on increasing and building more on this style. That's the whole idea. An MVP is not a prototype. It's not a plan for building the whole cake. The MVP is a cupcake. And many times not one cupcake, it's quite a few, so you can validate and figure out which one my customers like the most. And then you make a very informed decision about what to do next. Am I going to build a cake now or not? Okay, one example more realistic, Roger. More realistic, no, that did happen and someone became billionaire.
No, that example was perfect. The problem is that I discovered I have diabetes. So talking about that with you is just like, oh, I'm craving for sugar. But I also like shoes as well. So Zappos, I think, is one of the most famous examples that I have seen, where the two founders had this amazing idea. Should we start selling shoes through websites? So how would, and it's so interesting to look at that example and think about how would a web developer solve that problem of selling shoes through a website? They would build an inventory system. They would start looking for how I would buy the shoes, get it at a good price, and everything else that would do. A web designer would think about what would the experience be and everything that would happen. I don't know, a logistic guy would think about supply chain and everything that must happen. There's so many things involving to selling shoes. How would the user return it? How would the final customer say, I actually don't like the color, it's not comfortable, how would I return it? There's so many questions. And what they did was amazing. They just create a small website. They went to actually a shoe store, took photos of the shoes that they believe people would buy, and they put it on the website to validate someone would click on it and say, hey, I want to buy this. So they had no inventory, they had no physical shoes. And when someone bought that, what they had to do was to go to the store and buy the shoe. So they could validate the whole idea without investing millions of dollars to validate that, yes, people would buy shoes through the internet. And Paulo, have you bought a shoe through internet?
Oh, yes. I moved
really?
to US in 2000, yeah. I used to be like the internet buying things all the time. And in fact, I really like Zappos because they're from San Francisco and they did live on the city for several years. Yeah. And I just find that story fascinating. You know, it's so clever and so simple, you know, and so minimal. Like it was two developers, you know, it was a developer, hey, yeah, and you know, you can create a simple website pretty fast. Validate a whole business concept, it's hard, but create a simple website for people like us, it's
and you can start selling, right? You can reduce your margin to learn that, hey, there is actually $100 million market available that nobody's able to explore now, and you can just reduce your margin at the beginning to then stepping in that unexplored space. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Find a way to validate fast,
Yes.
build the MVP, get together, look at those three perspectives: business, user desirability, and feasibility, and figure out what is the MVP and go and validate, because you get a lot of learnings from it.
Yeah.
Okay, another example for you, Roger.
Yeah, that one is actually very close to my heart, because in 2015, when I moved to Australia, I joined a payments company, Tyro, and 2 months before I joined, they just got their banking license, the provisional banking license in Australia. So they could start developing, banking products. So lending was one of the first ones that they would step in. They had the deposits product, but the deposits doesn't bring a revenue stream. The lending would bring it, and I was leading that project. And I also introduced to them the concept of the Inception. So what's the best way for us to start that project? Was the moment that Tyro was expecting to show their power. For the last 10 years, they were developing a great company with great culture. Now they got a banking license, and they were the first company to get a banking license in Australia, I don't know, since the last big 4 banks here got it. So they were the only one who asked for it. When the people were asking, was that a good thing or bad thing that you got a banking license? Because nobody else was asking for it. But they did it. And we started the development with Inception. And you know how we finished the first day, Paulo? We finished the first day of the Inception for the product vision with CEO on one corner, with the VP of product and head of sales. They all politely arguing, saying, this is not what we agree. That definitely is not what we agree. So there was a misalignment between the leadership of the company on what the lending product would be. And if we just start developing the MVP without aligning people, we would waste a lot of time there. And it's a great success story, because we went from the idea to the MVP in the hand of the final user, accepting a lending offer and say, yes, give me that cash, and have the cash available in the hand of the final user in less than 4 months of development for a bank. And not sure if everybody understands the development cycle for a bank.
In 2015, right?
In 2015, yes. And the accept of the offer was in minutes. So we put the offer, the first and only option offer in the market, and the customer accepted in minutes. So that idea of, okay, let's validate if people actually gonna accept this. Minutes later, we had the yes, we got it. So for me, it's a good example of how we minimize that scope to an MVP. So instead of 2 years of development for a new banking product, we did it in months, validated, and then the go-to-market actually happened only 6 months after that. So we had 6 months of MVP iteration to validate everything. When we went to the market, it was a success already. We knew what the customer were needing and how to achieve it.
No, that's a beautiful story. I'm glad to see a lot of beautiful stories like this coming from Brazil as well. A lot of fintechs and institutions that work with banks now developing things really fast and validating. It's not only about developing, right? Because before we'd be like, oh, we want to reduce the development cycle from 2 years to 6 months. And you're able to with DevOps, all this. But now we shift. It's not about building something fast. It's about building the MVP, building and validating that we're going in a good direction. And I see so many companies, from small corporations to huge organizations, that used to think it's really hard to work this way, being very successful, with the Inception. It's the Inception focus on the MVP.
Yes.
Another great example from Brazil, and this one's from close to my heart because it comes from Rio de Janeiro, the city I was born. And I did meet Vinicius. And this comes from the year where Inception was getting started, 2011. So Vinicius and Thales, they won the 2nd place on a startup weekend in Rio de Janeiro in 2011. You don't get a lot of money from a startup weekend, right? But they got a congratulations, and I think they got like 500 reais, $100. Congratulations, this is a great idea. Woohoo! And then what did Vinicius do? He created a website, easytax.com.br. We call a taxi for you. What's your name? the address you're at, your phone number, and one big button written, call me a taxi now. There was, it was only HTML code. When you click on that button, it would send a mail to Vinicius himself. And then they got that money they won from the second prize and bought on Bing AdWords for one neighborhood in Rio de Janeiro. With this, they validated, yes, people are willing to call a taxi online. So that was their MVP. And they start, that huge corporation. Of course, validate MVP, what next? So they got together and figured out, oh, now we should do something to help the taxi cops. Put on their hands, oops, they don't want. What do we do next? Get back to your room. What's the minimal viable product to go validate to the next hypothesis? And then you go pivoting your business direction until it's a huge success. Probably you, when you start using those apps, you're at got on the moment of being a huge success. But they went through several build, measure, learn cycles, going on very good steps, good validated steps towards building a really successful product.
Yeah.
Okay, Roger, another example that I like is how would you build a bridge MVP style? And I did see a build being bridge in Brazil. It was quite interesting because it was a concrete build and it took several years. And I remember the river, and then they started there. And like 2 years later, there was a whole concrete bridge. On software, on digital products, how would you build nowadays? Probably there's a specialist, maybe an architect that say, hey, here's the best place to build a bridge. But then you have a business person that say, no, but I want to build bridge here because close to the market, I will sell more, more people cross here. And then you have UX, user experience specialists, that we interview people and say, oh, people said they prefer here and there. What do? We put a few wooden beams on those different spots, and we measure which one people use the most. The one people use the most, that's the place to build the bridge. That's how we build digital products.
Yeah.
And then you go and evolve. Okay, now that people like it, make it a little bigger, a little stronger. Now a bicycle can go through, a car, more people can cross it at the same time. And then you go again and a new release, more features to that bridge. Oh, now a car can go through until this happens, Roger. What happened here?
Yes, and that's so interesting, right? And I believe that Guilherme Tramontina has a question that's related to that on the chat. Let me see if I can bring the question here.
Nice, bring it on.
Yes. So there's usually a contention on building the MVP and quality, internal and external. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the trade-offs. So what we are trying to achieve with the MVP is to achieve success. What's the shortest path to achieve success? So if you just start building on top of fake things, not taking care of the quality and making sure that you will be able to scale and you will be able to have a solid solution. Because one thing that can scare your customers is quality. Is to go into your product website one day and it's down, it's not responding, or it's full of bugs. So it is important to take care of that, but it is important as well to figure out what's the minimal infrastructure and everything that I must have in place to be able to deliver that. Remember, the slice is not about building the whole foundation, everything that you need in the architecture to be able to then start validating a hypothesis. Build the small parts necessary to deliver that.
On this example, if the build cannot handle more than 5 tons, instead of, let's make the build the bridge stronger so it can handle the weight of the truck, and this will take much longer, just put something like you could put a cartoon written no more than 5 tons. But then if the truck driver is looking at his cell phone, the build will fall. So that's not enough. As an engineer, put a way to measure the weight. And if it's more than 5 tons, you close the thing so the truck cannot get in. That's what you do in digital product. Like even successful, for example, well, I don't know if it was Facebook, but like some of those social media, if they cannot handle, mail, that app for handling mail on iPhone, they were a huge success, but you had to wait on a queue to download it because they could not handle the load.
Yes.
So that's what we do. If you're not able to handle the load, don't let people come and cross the bridge yet.
Yeah, Paulo. And I actually have an example of that happened to me this week or last week. So a customer came to talk to us. So they have a successful product, and they had one of the sales guys saying, "Hey, we have to start developing APIs, and they found a partner that wants to consume the API. So it would be a business-to-business API consumption. And everybody was so excited about it, but the CTO had to make a decision. That will be 6 months or more of software development to make sure it's secure, everything, create the APIs and everything. And then we went to them, and I had a conversation with him, and he mentioned that what was his challenge. And then we were talking, and you know what we proposed? Build a static API that's returning fake data, hard-coded now, and ask your partner saying, can you integrate with that? Is that providing value to you? If you say yes, I will invest my team to develop software to make sure that the API is correct. Otherwise, I will not. I will just keep it in the first step to validate, because the APIs, contract, and everything that you have to validate. We could validate that without investing 6 months of a software engineering team. And then we move to the next phase.
Yes, that's the whole idea. And sometimes you have to say no, sorry, trucks are not allowed. That's it. Maybe in the future, 1 year down the line, yes, the bridge will be huge and trucks can cross. But right now it can't. And that's working with MVP, knowing how to say no or figuring out what are the minimum set of features to start with.
Yes.
Okay. So when you think about MVP, you need to think about the business perspective, the user experience, and you might, hey, there are truck drivers here, and you might have to say no for them, and the technology. But how do you figure out, okay, what is the MVP? That's not easy, because when you get those three perspectives, they usually point to different directions. Even though I show you the Venn chart, the intersection, it's hard to find that intersection. And that's not easy at all. And that comes to the practical experience on Inception. So Inception is this highly collaborative workshop where you get together for 1 week, bring people from those three different perspectives to align and figure out what is the vision and how do we get started? What is the MVP? That's the goal of the Inception. On it, it's very influenced, like I'm from Agile development, but Inception was highly influenced from Lean Startup, that whole idea of like put in the hands of the user. It's an approach where build something really small, put in the hands of the user and validate with the usage. But on the other hand, you have design thinking where you learn from the user. So Inception, those two together with the concept of MVP. And then you go in this cycle of, you're constantly building and learning what to do next. That's the whole idea with working with MVP. And that's the thought behind the Inception. We'll think big, but we'll start small with the concept of MVP. Roger, I want to hear your experience. You participate in quite a few Lean steps. Who participate on it? The ones that you run like.
Yeah, and it's so crucial because it's so common to see people doing projects kickoff, and then they invite the product team, they invite the software development team, the architects, and they don't invite the operations team, security. And sometimes you keep legal outside of it, and then you discover that the idea what you do is actually not possible, is not legal to be executed. So you should involve everybody who will be bring the different perspective to it. So it is a workshop for everybody who will have inputs on it, and must be. And the good thing about it is that it creates this collaborative environment where everybody's facing the same direction, instead of having security guys telling you, hey, actually my job here is to prevent you from introducing a security vulnerability. Then their job becomes, our job here is to develop this product idea, and you have to bring the security vision perspective to it. So it is important to involve all the departments that are necessary to develop that product.
So it's everybody together going through a Lean Inception. Here's some photos from presential Inception, the old world. Now we have the same remotely. I just like to set those photos because on it I recognize a lot of business people, user experience representatives, and a lot of engineers, people involved on building the solution. The agenda for Inception, I tried several agendas and I tried several combination of activities. That one works really nicely. And it took me quite a few years to get to this agenda. And after getting to this agenda, I keep on repeating it. And it is successful on several different contexts and instances. It all starts with a kickoff and ends with a showcase. What is the kickoff? Many times we have stakeholders, people that are very busy and cannot be with us the whole week. They're very interested in the direction of the solution, the product, the project, but they cannot be in the room the whole time. I understand they're involved in other things. Those are stakeholders. So they must come to the kickoff, talk about, hey, what do I expect from this group of people? What do I wish to get from this product? That's part of the kickoff. And then they might return, they must return by the end of the week, usually Friday, for the showcase. So they look what the group came up with, what's the overall vision and how they're going to start small, what's the plan for the MVP. And then they'll say, oh, this makes sense or not. Or we stay here on the room adjusting a few things because they might have information that the people in the room didn't have. So the very important thing is like, yes, there are stakeholders. Some people are busy. They cannot be the whole week. There are stakeholders. They must be on the beginning and at the end. For everybody else, they're active team members. And those might include the security people that Roger talked about, UX specialists, people that made discovery and did spend a lot of time understanding more about the needs of the customers on that area that are building the product, the engineers that know the technology that you might use for building the product, the business people related to that product. They're all in the room. First day, it's more the business vision. But together, we're going to write what's the product vision, what it is, what it's not, what it does not do, what are the main goals for the product as per the business perspective. On day 2, and remember, everybody's together, it's more about looking, okay, let's look from the perspective of the users. We'll talk about, okay, who are the personas? Where do they live? How do they behave? Not that we're going to interview them today. Hopefully you have this information from previous weeks or previous work or from a continuous discovery that you run in your company. And then on the afternoon, you might look, okay, what are the journeys of the users for accomplishing one of their goals? And then on day 3, you look back to those journeys, you look for the needs for the business and say, okay, what are the features that we should build to fulfill the needs from the users and help get better impact for our business? You're going to talk about the feature, the ideas that you have, the small bricks, still isolated, but small bricks that you think are amazing for building your product or your solution. On the afternoon, you do a big review, technical, UX from user experience and from business for each one of those features or ideas that you might have. And then on day 4, you look back at the journeys and say, okay, now that you understand, like you've been together as a group for 3 days, how do we improve the experience of our users with those ideas that we have for solution for a product? Oh, here I think we improve here, we improve here and there. And then after that, you do a sequencer. Now that we've been together for 4 days, in which order should you go about building, this solution, this product? Here is the intersection, because you do need quite a few days for us to understand that and create that ubiquitous common language between business, UX, and technology. So now when you go on day 4 and say, okay, in which order should you go? You're talking about the strategy of building your product. And you're talking about what is the MVP, because in which order, like you want to get fast to that MVP. And once you think you got the MVP, you build the MVP canvas where you go into more detail. Okay, what is this MVP? How do we test it? How do we validate? What did the expected result? How long it's going to take us? And then that's what you present on the showcase. I was pretty fast here because this is on the book and ask some of the Brazilians, because many Brazilians have been running Inception, like Roger, Tramontina, several. Inception started in Brazil. I was living there, when this started. But luckily, we have amazing Brazilians that are all over the world now, and they haven't taken Inception, like Roger to Australia and many other places. Roger.
Paulo, there's a good question here from Poliana Santos. And how do we run Inception, a company where people are too busy to dedicate 1 week? So can you share your strategies to introduce Inception in such scenario?
Yeah, it's amazing. We have a lot of sketches and anecdotes for this. Oh, I'm so busy, I cannot change, right? And then the first thing is the agenda. That kickoff and showcase. Yes, you're super busy. You are a stakeholder. It's amazing. I love stakeholders. You're busy. You cannot be here the whole week because you take care of 10 different products. You're stakeholders, right? Mm-hmm. But you must have a team that's dedicated. The dedicated team is the team doing the Inception.
Yeah.
Don't invite everybody. Yeah. Well, invite the stakeholders for the kickoff and the showcase. Yeah. And then pay attention to the dedicated team. If that dedicated team, you only have technical people, there's something weird there, because how are you going to find the best product only looking from the technical perspective? That's one mistake. Yeah. If you don't have business and UX representative. So you must have, and everybody's talking about this, like a good squad, a multifunctional product team. It's a well-balanced team. Yes. So that's a culture problem that goes beyond Inception. It's not only Inception. Like your team must be complete to look at those three perspectives. We're not. Yeah.
I have one example to share about a situation that I went through. So at Tyro, actually, nobody heard about it because, again, Inceptions for us, because I knew Paulo and I knew how to do it, was no-brainer. I know the value it's bringing. But when I proposed to Tyro to have people attending workshops for a whole week, the VP of product, and I was talking to all the stakeholders saying, that's how we will start this, here are the sessions. And I create index cards drawing how the sessions would be run and what's the value of each session. Basically what you have there, I had the index cards and I was explaining. He looked at me and he said, have you ever considered the cost of all of those people for 1 week in a room doing workshop? I looked at him and I said, have you considered the cost of not having those people talking to each other before developing this product? Awesome. And then he didn't answer me. And I assume he approved it because we went ahead. But I think it's that kind of conversation about, it's not about being busy. It's about priority as well, right? Saying, is this product a priority or not? And do you want to pay the price of people not communicating, not being aligned to develop it as well? That's how I see this.
Yeah. It's that sentence, right? It's building the right product and building it right.
Yes.
We're from agile development. We're pretty good on building it right, but many times we're not building the right product. That's why I shift from, okay, I need to get closer to the business and figure out how do we build the right product.
Yes. Yes.
And Lean Startup and MVP and Lean Inception, all those come from this. And I do understand. Let's get as an example, Scrum's from 95. It became famous like in 2006, 2007. Take a long time. Lean Startups from 2011. Inception, like the book in English, came in 2018. It will take quite a while. The companies that start doing this before, they have a greater advantage. The ones that use old techniques, they
lag behind.
Yeah, they're like behind, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll go really fast now so we can have more time for the Q&A. The things like the world does not start with a lean inception, even though the word is inception. There are a lot of things that happened before. In fact, like I do like continuous discovery, right? That you're always discovering and figure out what you're building next. So business requests, they don't come like straight to a project team or to an inception. Like they should be validated. And that cycle, build, measure, learn, that works as well on the continuous discovery. Like validate those business requests to get more informed idea. Do customer research, do validate experiments, run maybe prototypes and experimentation before to gather more information. So, and then when you think, oh, looks like we understand the problem that we're solving here, then you bring the team and run an inception. So the world does not start with inception. There are a lot of other things that we do besides inception. To help us validate better hypotheses.
Yeah. Paul, I think you are touching on a question from Katya, actually, which is how frequent do you run Leanception then? If it is a continuous process, then you accumulate learnings until you do it. What's the normal pace? 6 months, 1 year?
I'll tell you the perfect world. In the perfect world, you don't run Inception. In the perfect world, you have the perfect product team doing continuous discovery and continuous delivery. Everybody's aligned the whole time. Yeah. You don't need Inception. We're all aligned. We're experimenting and building and going from continuous discovery to continuous delivery. Unfortunately, we are not on this perfect world. Maybe it will take us 20, 30 years in the industry to get there. So if your organization needs to align people on, okay, we kind of understood, what we need to build, how do we get started? That's an Inception. How often? New project, for sure. The beginning of a project, yes, run an Inception so you get started. When you have an MVP, you put it in the hands of the customers, and then you find that you're totally off. And then the team has to work on something else. Maybe you need an Inception. You did run an Inception, you planned the MVP, you put the hands of the customers, you got learning, you pivot a little bit. You don't need an Inception. Now the team's working better together as a group. Quick workshops, like half a day. Just from time to time, you need a workshop for alignment. But those are short. It's not an Inception. Inception more from, okay, we need to bring people together to get aligned and get started.
Fantastic.
A generic answer would be like every 6 months, an Inception for a team. Because after a while, usually what happens, the team is aligned, you have an Inception, and then from the MVP, you go to the user stories and tasks, and 6 months down the line, you have feedback from the users, bugs, user stories, new requests comes from the business. So after a while, it's important to, okay, stop, look again, what's the strategy, what's the vision, what's the next MVP? I would say every 6 months.
Yeah, perfect.
Good question. Okay, what else, Jose? I want to stop this presentation and only Q&A. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Closing the presentation. Think big, start small, learn fast.
I think there are a few questions that we didn't answer here yet. I will go through them.
Let's go to the questions now, and I'll stop sharing the presentation. So thank you. The book's on Amazon. There's a lot of information on Caroli.org. Roger and myself will be running a training this month on July 12th. If you want to share more on Inception, we're very happy.
And we share much more, right? It's not only 1 hour.
It's 9 hours. We go in details about the whole agenda and the stories. And the tips, because it's not easy facilitating, That's the thing I realized that I want to do for our community. It's not easy being a facilitator of a Inception. So that's why I've been running this to foster and help this community.
And I think the best way to learn is by talking with people who are doing it and have real world experience on how to do it. So there's so many situations where I would remember you running and then you just being calm there and say, okay, so that's a good risk that we have to address. Put it in the parking lot. Let's move on.
The parking lot. Okay, let's park it for now.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, good questions. Move on. But let's see. Jen.
Okay, let's see the questions.
Roger, a good question.
Let's stop sharing here the presentation. How do we do this? Stop sharing the presentation.
Here. I have to move.
Do your powerful magic there.
Yes, I will do my mark. So this is it, and then we go back to this.
There you go. Awesome.
Yeah. So Jean asked about an advice on how to approach a company that's project-oriented to become a product-oriented Lean Inception, so Lean Inception could be applied. Do you want to take that, Paulo?
Yeah, it's. I like to do book club. Give Eric Ries's book, Lean Startup, Mark Kagan book. Lean Inception book, Teresa Torres' book on continuous discovery. Start giving those books because the world has changed, and it's kind of new, product development. We're not good at it before. I have to confess, we used to do project. Nowadays, we are much better on it.
Yeah, I can have a take on this as well. So I actually have a real case at DNX. So DNX started with 2 AWS certified DevOps guys who want to start their own business, and they were successful, start hiring people to help them grow the business, consultancy company. When we reached 20 people, we were not able to add any new product, any new project. And it's consultancy, right? So it's project-based. And what we did was I looked at the situation and said, wait a second, people are not having the time to learn how to work together. So what we did was we stabilized the teams. We create squads and said, okay, so there's a squad for that kind of project, another squad for the different projects. And we were able to almost double the number of concurrent projects we would execute just by stabilizing the team. So I think it's not, the first thing that I don't like to do is to say we should stop doing things project-based and move to product-based. That creates resistance on the head of the leaders of the companies normally. Instead of that, I say I would go with what they care about. They care about like increasing throughput, reduce lead time, everything that we want to do in the agile world as well. So I talk about that. So maybe there are better ways to organize the work, and there are better ways to start a project. There are better ways to start a product, and that's when I bring the solution. First, we have to talk about the problem we're trying to solve. And that's how I approach this kind of question.
Yeah, it's a good point, Roger, because like usually finance and contracts, they're project oriented.
Yes.
So one tip's like, don't try to change everything, accept the project oriented world, but within the project boundaries, start working the product way.
Yeah, fantastic. Another good question here is, would love to hear, it's from Henrique Yababuchi. I would like to hear from you the difference between Leanception and design sprint. They look similar conceptually. That you should have heard that many times.
Yeah, yes. First, I want to talk about the coincidence, right?
Okay.
Leanception and design sprint, they are born on the same time frame, right? Myself and Jake Knapp, we're both from Silicon Valley at the same time. In fact, by coincidence, we both work at Google on the same time. We almost work on the same project. What happened? We're both heavily influenced by Agile and design thinking, right? They both started around, 2000, from our experience, from 2008, 2009, 2010. Lean Startup was not there. Leanception, when it started, I need an excuse to shorten the inceptions for 1 week. So I shift my focus to Lean Startup and MVP. Design Sprint does not have the focus on MVP. Leanception has the focus on MVP. Jake, I used to be a developer that liked Inception. So I was a developer that would fluctuate a lot on the business side as a consultant. But I saw it was really important to have UX people, and design thinking for me was the tools for working. Jake Knapp is more a designer. So Jake Knapp, he came to the same conclusion that, we need a collaborative workshop. Both of us came to the same conclusion. And the length is 1 week as well. Look how interesting. Like, could be longer, could be shorter. Both came to the same conclusion. It's a 1 week collaborative workshop. But the goal of a design sprint is to explore options, think about the vision, explore a few options, test with users, real users, and select one winning prototype at the end of the week. But you have prototype with interface and all of this. On the Leanception, I do not want to have a prototype. I do not want to interview the users. For me, it's so important, like user research, that we must do this much more than only 1 day. And at the end of the week, I do not have a prototype. I have a plan for the MVP. So the decisions on the prototype and the best design will come either before or after. But the group is aligned on what is the MVP, what should we validate. So they're very different, this aspect. Design sprint, it's about design, understand the prototype options, and select the one winning prototype. Leanception is about aligning people from different perspectives, business, user experience, and technologies, into what is the vision and how do we get started? What is the MVP? What are we validating? In the best world, you have a Leanception and a design sprint. For that MVP, now you do a design sprint to figure out what is the best prototype for that MVP. That's
Amazing.
one possible combination.
Amazing. And I like what you guys have in common, because when I look at design thinking, for instance, there is no time frame, right? It's all about expanding, contracting, learning, feedback again. But you guys were able to put a process in a fixed time frame to say, start here, finish here, and that's the product. So is either a prototype from design sprint, or for you is the MVP canvas is exactly everybody aligned and ready to produce.
Yeah,
which
it's
is
a
amazing.
final result. And
Yeah.
for JKNAB, the final result is the winning prototype.
Yes.
And both has something very interesting. It's not based on theory. He did run it
Yes.
hundreds of times. I did run it hundreds of times, and that's it. And we just rotate, follow this recipe that's working really well for me and for a lot of people. And my luck is that when I moved to Brazil, I started blogging in 2008. And then when I moved to Brazil, I felt bad because I was only blogging in English, and I decided to blog in Portuguese. So everything that showed up from Inceptions and Inceptions was only in Portuguese. And because I was very influential in Brazil, I helped create Agile Brazil, a lot of people started using it. So I had the feedback not only from me, from Roger, and from the people close to me, but for a whole community in Brazil. So Inception became very rich and based on experience from a whole country, a whole community, the Agile community in Brazil. So I'm very thankful to the Brazilian community, because together we built this. I got thousands of feedback from Brazilians using it on several different contexts.
Yes. I think I have time for one more at least. And that's an interesting one. I'm curious to hear your answer to that, Paulo, which is there a case in which you wouldn't recommend running the Linkception? When wouldn't you recommend running it?
Oh, yeah, quite a few. First, I always ask, what do you want at the end of the week? If you want a prototype, that's not an Inception, that's a design sprint. That's an easy one, right? Which is an amazing workshop as well. Another one, I want to figure out, I have a portfolio, several different projects, and I want to explore all of them to decide which one should I start with, which product should I start. That's not an Inception. It's a workshop to understand the options and prioritize a winning one at the end. Like this, there are several workshops. It's a new team getting together. I want to talk about the ways of working. We want to get to know each other better. That's not an Inception. You're focused on the people on the team. So the big question is like, what do you want out of the week? If it is to align a group of people about the product, and start with the MVP, that's an Inception. If it is something else, that's not an Inception. You might even use one activity from an Inception or another, but like, stop, think what you want out of your 1 week or 2 weeks, your workshop. I don't recommend very long workshops. Collaborative workshops, they need to be 1 week or shorter. Figure out which activities will help you achieve that goal.
Fantastic. Let me see. I think we cover. No, there's one last one. How do you stabilize a team, Roger? Defining process, standardizing. Let me bring it to the. I think it's more about like what are the common things that a team together could achieve. I normally try to look at ways to organize. For instance, for a product base, you could have people like feature teams focusing on the search part of the website, while some other would be looking at the shopping cart, and that's possible as well. For us, for a consultancy company, would be the nature of the project. So for a DevOps project, and Windows DevOps project would have one team. For serverless DevOps project would have a different team, so they can specialize on that as well. It really, for me, there's no standard answer. You have to observe your environment and understand what's the best configuration that you can optimize for delivery, because you're always optimizing for something. The problem is that most of the companies optimize for cost reduction. They want to reduce costs. They just want to reduce costs. But if you show that they can gain more by optimizing for delivery, optimizing for innovation, optimizing for new features, then you change the conversation.
Nice. I like it. We should optimize for people happiness.
Yes. You know that I were I was head of people in culture for 6 months. Some other day we have to talk about it. It's amazing to be in that space as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, well, Roger, I want to thank you for this. It was really nice to be here talking with you and everybody else. I won't call each one of you by name, but like I was, reading your name here in the message. Thank you so much. Really, really good to see you, on the comments and connect again. So,
no,
thank
the
you.
pleasure is mine. Thanks everybody who joined us. It was fantastic, and this will be available on YouTube, right?
It is already.
It is already. So we stay there. Fantastic.
There.
Okay, I'm gonna show my kids saying, "That's Paulo."
Yeah, they won't remember. Well, João remembers you. The other day we were talking, and
yeah,
I told him this story about who taught me to give him bath on a bucket.
Old stories.
Old stories.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Fantastic. We should do this more often. Amazing. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.